image that doesn't have text on top of it. So here's the painting in question. I hope everybody has had a chance to view it in person previously, and of course after the talk as well, because it's always better to see the real thing. I did want to point out today we are videotaping largely because the grandson of the donor of this painting wanted to see the talk, but he lives in Austin, Texas, so we are videotaping today, so that's why we've got. Thank you, Brian, for being here to take care of that today. So here we have this painting by Irving Manoir. Don't feel alone if you're not familiar with the name Irving Manoir, because most people are not. In fact, today he's virtually an unknown artist. However, this painting seems to capture the attention of our visitors. In fact, when we polled visitors last fall, prior to beginning this series of talks about landscape paintings from the collection, we gave them a selection of 16 landscape paintings from the museum's collection. And hands down, this was the #1 favorite of our visitors. So we have saved it for the last talk in this series about landscape paintings. So I want to kind of consider today, what is it about this painting that draws people to it? In fact, when Mr. Tom's grandson contacted me, he said, it was one of the paintings that was one of his personal favorites of seeing it in his grandparents' home. It's had an impact, a really strong impact on a lot of people. And so I want to kind of consider that today and consider how the painting kind of attracts visitors. But just to give you a little bit of background about how this painting became part of the museum's collection, it is a gift to the museum that was given in 2003 by William Toms of Midland, Texas, in memory of his wife, Roxanne Toms. Bill and Roxanne were OU alums who began collecting art in 1966 and created quite an outstanding collection with particular strengths in artists from the Taos Society of Artists. And so it's a very important collection. I was fortunate when the collection was given to the museum in 2003 to go visit Mr. Toms in his home before the paintings were packed up. And he shared the stories of how he and Roxanne acquired all the works in their collection. According to his story about the painting we're discussing today, Roxanne was not immediately a fan of the painting, so she may be kind of in the minority here of people who were not immediately drawn to the painting. But it is a painting that Bill Toms bought on the spot when he saw it in 1981, even though Irving Manoir was not a well-known artist. So he bought the painting, brought it home, and convinced Roxanne that it was indeed a very good painting to have as part of their collection. But as Mr. Toms said, he bought this painting even though Manoir was not a major artist because it had an impact on him. As he said, when something talked to us, we couldn't walk off and leave it. And I love that quote, and I think it encapsulates what this painting does, that it talks to visitors and kind of doesn't let people just walk off and leave it quickly. So I want to kind of consider today what it is about the painting that does that, but it certainly did that for Bill Toms in 1981 when he bought the painting. And this is kind of a bad photo I took it this morning with my phone, but I just wanted to point out to you where the painting is located. It is on the main level of the Lester wing of the East Building. The Stewart wing of the East Building. And it was installed there in 2005 when the museum built this wing, the Lester wing. It was installed there by former director Eric Lee. And I think it was a wonderful choice in that he felt that by installing it here, it's really a painting that you see as you come into this building through the main door and come into the Lester wing, and it draws you down that corridor into the East building. And so it was really a brilliant choice, I think, to position that painting to really pull people into the museum, and it has done that since 2005. So again, just kind of a curatorial decision that was made, again, based on kind of the visual power of this painting. So I want to just take a moment to, as we look at this painting, does anybody want to share what you think it is about this painting that causes it to be the #1 People's Choice of landscape paintings in the museum's collection? Any thoughts? Yes.
There's so much light.
Okay, so much light.
Much light. It's well. The focal point is well framed on either side by 2 tall aspens, and also the colors on either side, the yellow, and also the eye is drawn to that. There's a field of color behind the figures, the violet. It's difficult to see these colors in the slide, but
Right.
it becomes more apparent in the original.
Yes, so true. Yes, again, the slide never translates the beauty of the painting. But yes, I think that the light here, the color, all of these aspects are certainly things that draw people to this painting. And the way, like I said, the way the composition is framed with the aspen. Any other comments about the power of this painting?
It's very pleasant.
It's very
It's
pleasant.
very pleasant. It's calming. Has a nice plein air quality. It has detail, but it doesn't have detail, and it draws you into the subjects on the move in the center, and it's just like I say, but it's just a very pleasant. And I can see why he bought it on the spot.
Like you said, it has a pleasant quality about it. Like you said, it has almost a relaxing quality. I like your description that it has detail but not detail. For instance, if you look at the figures that are included in the painting, there's very little detail. So there's enough detail but not too much. So we get lost in that. Any other things? Yes.
Well, it seems to go to the beginning. Excuse me, I thought there was a mystery about the time of year, because we have the typical aspen colors that come in the fall. But we have that blooming tree over there that looks like spring, early spring. And then we have the snow on the ground. And that kind of makes it a little bit like a wonderland. Not that that couldn't happen in certain weather conditions, but it's not typical.
Okay. So there seems to be a little bit of a seasonal confusion, perhaps, that may or may not have been totally realistic. Yes?
When you walk by, too, as far as drawing in, those of us who are pedestrians, when you walk by and you see everyone looking at something,
Yeah.
just it does curiosity, and the aspens that frame it, like Bill was talking about, they're like kind of like a gateway, maybe to some, what's happening.
So it provides us a gateway into this
Almost participation in what's going on, which, if you connect to the art rather than observing, and participant rather than observer, as we talked about before. Very engaging.
Excellent comments, and thank you all for sharing some of your thoughts about the impact this painting had. I think those are all really relevant to the kind of appeal this painting has to visitors. We do know some things about the painting. We know that it depicts a sacred grove known as Gloriettta, not to be confused with the town Gloriettta in New Mexico. It's closer to Santa Fe. But a sacred grove that is located near Twining, New Mexico. And I'll show you a map in just a second. But Twining is basically the Taos Ski Valley area. So if you're familiar, if you've ever been skiing in Taos, you've been to the area near Twining. But Twining was kind of an abandoned town, and then later became the location for Taos Ski Valley. We know that the original title that Manoir gave this painting was Fairy Tale Land in New Mexico, which kind of draws on what you were talking about, how this, with the Wonderland, I think is the word that you used, in terms of thinking about the different seasons that seem to be depicted. And we know that it was the painter, Manoir's, one of his favorites of his works. So again, we're back to that. It seems to be a lot of people's favorite, even the artists. So even though we know very little about Irving Manoir, I just want to just share with you a little bit of background information about his life. And the only photo I can find is not a very good one, so sorry, that's a little small photo that I couldn't enlarge very much. But Manoir lived from 1891 to 1982. He was born in Chicago, and he studied art at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, graduating in 1915. He taught after graduation at the School of the Art Institute from 1916 until 18, and then later in the 30s he went back to teaching there. His years from 1916 to 18 were really significant because that's where he met his future wife, Hazel, who was a student in his lettering and design course that he taught at the SAIC. So they met in 1916 and later married in 1918. And the only book that I can find about Manoir was written by Hazel. And I did manage to order a copy for the museum. It's called The Life and Travels of an Artist, Irving K. Manoir, and it's by Hazel Manoir. So according to his wife Hazel, Manoir was very busy between the years of 1918 and 1924. He was exhibiting his paintings widely, so even though he's not well known today, in his time, he did fairly well with his paintings. His work was exhibited at the Art Institute of Chicago, at the Corcoran Gallery in Washington, D.C., as well as galleries in California and elsewhere. We know also from Hazel a little bit about some of the emphasis in Manoir's teaching. For instance, he employed a method called dynamic symmetry in his design classes that he taught, and he was already using similar techniques, but then he met J. Hambidge, an architectural historian who taught at Yale University, and who had formulated this theory of dynamic symmetry. And so after the two of them got to know each other, Hambidge asked Manoir to become the Western representative of the dynamic symmetry school. And dynamic symmetry is a proportioning system. And here's a little diagram to give you an idea. It's based on the measurements of classical buildings in Greece. I will not even try to explain the math involved because, as the joke goes, art historians become art historians because we were told there would be no math. So I won't even try to go into that detail, but just I wanted to point out that that Manoir was very well trained in using this kind of dynamic symmetry and employing that in his composition. So as you were talking, Bill, about the composition and the structure, I mean, I think that's something that comes through, even though we don't like scientifically analyze it or anything like that. But there's that sense of that dynamism, that structure that comes through in the painting. But also in Hazel's book, we know that in 1924, Manoir was sent to Taos, New Mexico, and Hazel also went. And he was sent by the former mayor of Chicago, Carter Harrison Jr., who was in addition to his life as a politician, was also an important art patron. And Harrison had formed a group of art patrons, which included the Chicago meatpacker, also Manoir. That gets that little song going in those of us heads who were around at that time. But this syndicate, as he called it, this group of art patrons, helped to fund exploratory trips to the Southwest for artists, and then also oftentimes bought their paintings. And so in 1924, Manoir and along with Hazel went to Taos, New Mexico, and this is the only time that he did visit New Mexico. So that's why you may notice that if you look at the label on the painting out in the gallery, it says 1923. Based on some readings that I've done for this presentation, it seems pretty clear that the date of the painting was 1924, because that's the year that Manoir did visit Taos. The 1923 date was based on some correspondence that Bill Toms had with Manoir when Manoir was about 91. So, sometimes memory is not always the best. And so it does seem that it would have been painted in 1924 instead. Just to give you an idea of some of the other artists who were included in this journey that Harrison sent Manoir on. He also went with Walter Ufer, who's pictured here, Victor Higgins, who's here, and Martin Hennings, shown here seated. And all three of these artists became associated with the Taos Society of Artists. Manoir, as I've already pointed out, did not. That was the only time he went to Taos. It was in 1924. Again, maybe part of why he's not as well known, because he didn't ever become part of this group of artists who did quite well in terms of publicity for themselves as an art group. Just a couple of examples of paintings by Ufer and Higgins that you can see up in the Atkins collection of this museum on the second floor. Here's a painting by Walter Ufer on the left called Going East, and a painting by Victor Higgins on the right called Indian Composition. And both of these, as I said, are hanging currently on the second floor of the Stewart wing of the museum. This painting by E. Martin Hennings is also part of the Atkins collection, but it's not currently on display here. It is currently residing at the Philbrook. This is a collection that we share with Philbrook. And this painting called Going to Blue Lake is currently at the Philbrook. So let's get back to Manoir's painting that, as we've kind of established, would have been painted in 1924 during this trip to Taos, to the Taos area. And we know that it depicts not particularly Taos, but an area north of Taos, the sacred grove called Gloriettta,